racism is still here, but religious persecution is it's something that really is so antithetical to the Western tradition, and much of the bloodshed that was fought in the West was to free ourselves from religious persecution. And so the fact that Muslims now are being targeted religiously is something I think that should be very troubling for Western people, and I think we should remind them of that. But we also have to be a community that I think that really makes it clear to people that what our religion is truly about.
You mentioned several times the word actions, and if I remember correctly, Imam Ghazali, who's known as the Hujjat Islam, he mentioned knowledge without action is vanity and action without knowledge is insanity. And I do believe it's a hadith, you can correct me if it's incorrect, where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said a time will be approaching where the preachers will be many and the fuqaha will be few,
right.
And in that time knowledge will be better than action. Would you say we're living in that time, we're passing through a period?
Well, there's definitely, that's very important. There's a chapter in Al-Bukhari which is called Bab al-Ilm Qabla al-Qawli wal-Amal, the chapter of knowledge before speaking or action. So knowledge has to precede action. When you act without, we have a lot of activists in our community, and when you have activists that are not informed by sound knowledge, they can end up doing a lot more harm. I mean, communism is a really good example of people that recognized wrongs and injustices in the world, but because they didn't have a sound understanding of the world, they ended up doing far more harm than good. I mean, I don't doubt Che Guevara was very troubled by the problems of South America when he had his motorcycle trip through there as a young man, went to medical school, and became a revolutionary. A lot of his instincts were probably very humane instincts, but he adopted a type of ideology or philosophy that was brutal and inhumane. And that's why communist revolutions caused far more harm than they were alleviating. So the same is true for Muslims that adopt these types of ideologies, and they want to bring about social justice. I mean, there's a lot of Muslims, that's where they're rooted in, social justice. Because from one perspective, the world is intolerable. I mean, if you look out there at the world today and look at how people are being treated, and how, I mean, just if you look at Iraq alone, I mean, the situation in Iraq it's unbelievable. And the death and destruction that's happened in the Muslim world at the hands of just all of this horrible slaughter that's been going on for a long time. Chechnya is a good example of that. So Muslims, there are a lot of Muslims that are so troubled by these things they want to go out and change them. But if you don't change them within the constraints that God has placed on people, then you cause more harm than good. And I think that's where the Muslims really were suffering right now.
I find it incredible that in one of the hadiths where the Messenger of God ﷺ mentions that synonymous or what occurs from a resulting of a taking away of knowledge is widespread killing, harj.
Right, harj.
And pretty much we're in
yeah, that knowledge is taken from people and killing and slaughter.
And the companions, they asked the Prophet, what is Hajj, Ya Rasulullah, what is this? Yeah. So why did they ask that particular question? Because it was known to them in the Arabic language, Hajj.
Well, they wanted clarification. Yataharaj is a word. The Prophet ﷺ used words, like he used a word wahan. And they asked what wahan is. Wahan is a type of weakness, but it's a very specific type of weakness. And while it was their language, they wanted to know, because sometimes terms are used. I mean, the Quran was changing meanings. Don't forget that. For instance, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honored amongst you are the people with the most piety. Well, karam in the Arabic language, before Islam, in Jahiliyyah, karam had to do with getting drunk and being lavish. That's why karam is the vine of the grape. And wine is related to karm. So the idea was the Arabs, you got your guest really drunk, and then you lavished on them everything that you had, and that was a sign of karam, that you were a kareem. And so the Quran radically altered that understanding of karam. Many words in the Quran were altered. So I think the Sahaba, when they would ask, what exactly do you mean by that? what does that mean specifically? They could understand a word in their language linguistically, but how is it being used here? And that's also wanting a clarification, because words have a lot of connotations. They don't just mean, you have a denotation, what a word denotes, the specific first primary meaning, but then you have connotations, what it implies.
When I think of this book, The Creed of Imam Tahawi, I automatically remember Imam Nawawi, rahmatullah alayhi, and I remember two books of his, the Riyadh al-Salihin and the 40 Hadith, and these two books, like the Creed, are pretty much in everyone's homes because of divine acceptance.
Right.
I mean, what was so special about Imam Tahawi? Why do you think over 1100 years people like yourself have revisited his text and feel that it is required reading once again? I mean,
well, Imam Tahawi, he was a brilliant scholar. He's recognized. He was Imam al-Muzani's nephew. His mother, Ukht al-Muzani, is one of the great Shafi'i scholars. She actually has an opinion in the Shafi'i madhab in Bab al-Zakat. She's quoted. And he was also he was a son by Rada'a of one of the great muhaddithin of that time. He was born into a family of incredible erudition and learning, and because of that, he was exposed early on. He was very bright, and he mastered the Shafi'i madhab, and then became a Hanafi. He preferred the Hanafi madhab, which upset quite a bit of Shafi'i. I mean, you can imagine Imam al-Muzani is one of the great Shafi'i scholars, a direct student. Both his mother and his uncle were direct students of Imam Shafi'i. Yeah. His father was a scholar as well, but not as brilliant as his mother. She was the better of the two in scholarship. So he was born into that family. He was a wonderfully sincere human being, and it's attested by many stories of the lack of ego. And there's an interesting thing in our tradition. We actually believe that books get an acceptance, what's called a qabul, from God. And